Imagine this scenario for a second, right? You're a behavioral therapist. You walk into the clinic on a Tuesday morning, totally ready to work one-on-one with a young autistic child.
Just a normal Tuesday.
Exactly, just a normal day. But another therapist called in sick. So your supervisor walks in, hands you a second child, a kid you have literally never met.
Oh, no.
Yeah. No curriculum, no behavior plan, and the supervisor just says, hey, we're short-staffed today, just make it work.
Just make it work. I mean, it's a terrifying position to be put in. And honestly, it happens far more often than we'd like to admit.
Right.
The pressure to just sort of, make it work in the face of all that logistical chaos is huge. But in field days, dealing with vulnerable human beings, making it work without the proper training or preparation is it's a direct violation of professional ethics.
Which brings us right into today's deep dive. Welcome, everyone. Whether you're, currently studying for your BCBA exam, or maybe you're a seasoned practitioner trying to catch up on the field, or you're just insanely curious about the invisible guardrails that keep clinical professions safe, this exploration is custom tailored for you.
Definitely.
Today, our mission is to unpack Section E.3 of the BACD task list, which is all about developing and maintaining professional competence. And the core premise we're looking at today is that professional competence is not like a static noun.
It's not a diploma on the wall.
Right. It is a verb. It's this continuous active mechanism that you build through relentless learning, rigorous supervision, and brutal self-reflection.
Yeah, and to really get into the mechanics of this, we're pulling from a massive stack of source materials today for you. We've got multiple mock BCBA exams, the official ethics code for behavior analysts, and this highly detailed workbook of ethical case scenarios that, frankly, show us exactly what happens when theory crashes into reality.
And we're not just going to, sit here and recite the rule book at you. We want to look at those real-world clinical examples where really good intentions actually pave the road to ethical disasters.
Because we need to understand the underlying behavioral mechanisms of why these rules exist in the first place, right?
Exactly. So let's start by dismantling a very comforting myth, I guess, the idea of the finished professional.
Oh, yeah. We humans love a neat categorization, don't we?
You really do.
You're either a student or you're a master. We want to believe that once you, walk across that graduation stage and you pass your board exam, the learning phase is over and the doing phase finally begins.
But the ethics code, specifically code 1.06, explicitly shatters that illusion.
It completely does. It states that competence requires active, ongoing professional development. You don't just get to hold your credential and coast. Maintaining your competence means constantly reading relevant literature like, the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis or JABA.
Right.
It means attending conferences and participating in targeted workshops.
And the governing body actually attaches hard numbers to this. It isn't just a vague suggestion to, pick up a book when you feel like it.
No, not at all.
The requirement for a certified behavior analyst is 32 hours of continuing education units, or CEUs, every 2 years. And within those 32 hours, you are specifically mandated to have 4 hours dedicated strictly to ethics.
Yep. And 3 hours in supervision if you oversee others.
Great. But let's look at what actually happens when someone just ignores this mechanism. The sources detail a case study about a guy named Joaquin. So Joaquin is a newly certified BCBA working at an agency.
Okay.
And every year, a few of the senior clinicians go to these national ABA conferences.
Yeah.
But Joaquin's employer doesn't cover the cost of travel, and they don't pay the registration fee.
Which is, unfortunately, a painfully common reality in many agencies.
Oh, for sure.
Budgets are tight, and professional development is usually the very first thing that gets cut.
Exactly. So Joaquin decides he isn't going to make any effort to gain more information or experience outside of his daily routine. He figures, hey, I passed the exam. The strategies I learned in grad school and during my supervision are totally sufficient.
He assumes his knowledge is permanently enough.
Yeah. But what is actually happening to Joaquin's skill set here?
Well, what's happening is a mechanism called skill decay, combined with industry evolution. Joaquin assumes his competence is basically locked in amber the day he passes his exam.
Right.
But the field of applied behavior analysis is not static. JABA publishes thousands of pages of new, peer-reviewed research every single year.
Right.
We're constantly discovering more humane, more efficient ways to assess behavior and teach skills.
Wow, yeah.
So if Joaquin is still relying on the exact same functional analysis protocols he learned, say, 5 years ago, He's missing out on highly synthesized, less intrusive models that have been developed since then.
So if you aren't updating your mental software, you're not just standing still.
No, you're actually sliding backward as the entire field moves forward.
I think of it like this. Getting your BCBA certification is a lot like getting your basic driver's license when you're 16.
Okay, I like this.
Right. Like, that little plastic card makes you legally allowed to drive a car on the road, but it absolutely does not mean you are instantly equipped to drive an 18-wheeler hauling hazardous materials through a mountain pass in a blizzard.
That analogy highlights the exact danger perfectly. Your basic license gives you the legal foundation, but if you take that 18-wheeler into the mountains without specialized training, your foundational knowledge doesn't give you traction in the snow.
You're going to crash.
You're going to cause a huge wreck. And in behavior analysis, failing to stay current puts vulnerable clients at direct risk of harm.
For sure.
For example, the sources mention the danger of pseudoscientific fads. Like, imagine a parent coming into the clinic insisting on using a restrictive gluten and casein-free diet to treat their child's severe behavioral outburst.
Oh, man.
Yeah. If Joaquin hasn't stayed current with the scientific literature, he won't know the empirical data on those diets. He won't know how to ethically and scientifically guide that parent away from a fad and toward an actual evidence-based intervention.
But, I can hear experienced clinicians screaming at their phones right now, though. Like, when do I have time to read a 40-page JABA article when I have 20 billable hours a week, 3 staff members quitting, and endless insurance reports to write?
It is a massive point of friction. I hear it all the time.
How does the ethics code even address the reality of sheer burnout versus the demand for ongoing competence?
Well, the ethical code doesn't care if you're tired.
Oof, harsh.
It is harsh. But because the client's right to effective treatment doesn't disappear just because the clinician is burned out,
Great.
the hard truth is that if your caseload is so heavy that it prevents you from maintaining your competence, the ethical obligation is to reduce your caseload, not to abandon your professional development.
Wow.
You have to advocate for protected time, or you risk practicing outside your depth.
So if faking it or coasting is unethical, that leads us directly into another massive danger zone for any professional. The boundary between what you're legally allowed to do and what you're personally equipped to do.
Yes. This is the critical distinction between scope of practice and scope of competence.
Okay, let's break those down. How do they actually function differently in the real world?
So scope of practice is the broad legal umbrella. It's the entire set of activities that the profession's governing body says behavior analysts are permitted to do.
So that covers what, everything?
Pretty much. Everything from early intervention for toddlers to corporate organizational management, all the way to gerontology.
Got it.
But scope of competence, as defined by Code 3.03, is strictly tied to you. It's limited to your individual, specific training, education, and supervised experience.
Okay, so just because a BCBA can legally work with any population doesn't mean you specifically should.
Exactly.
Our workbook sources have 2 fantastic case studies illustrating this. First, we have Vasha. Vasha is a BCBAD, meaning she has her doctorate.
Highly educated.
Very. And she has 10 years of highly successful experience providing behavioral services to children in school settings. She gets offered a very lucrative job to direct an adult program focused on increasing independent living skills.
And this is exactly where the trap springs. She's a doctorate-level professional. She knows the principles of behavior perfectly.
Right. She knows her stuff.
But a school environment is highly structured. It's focused on academic readiness and classroom management. Adult independent living involves navigating community safety, financial literacy, vocational skills, and entirely different reinforcement systems.
It's a whole different ballgame.
It really is. So ethically, Vasha cannot simply accept the job and figure it out on day one. She must first explicitly disclose her lack of specific experience to the employer.
Okay, and then we have Carlos. Carlos is a recently certified BCBA looking for a new job. He interviews at a company that provides organizational behavior management, or OBM, to corporate clients.
Interesting pivot.
Yeah, and they offer Carlos the job and say, hey, we want you to help build our ABA services in the corporate space. But Carlos has 0 OBM experience. He has never pinpointed a corporate performance metric or analyzed a company's systemic contingencies.
And according to Code 3.03, Carlos must decline that role if he's expected to practice independently right away.
Wait. Have to synthesize this for a second, because coming from outside the clinical world, this sounds kind of wild.
How so?
Well, in the corporate world, the ultimate motto is literally fake it till you make it. You stretch your resume, you take the job you're only 60% qualified for, and you just learn on the fly. That's how people get promoted.
Right. It's encouraged.
Yeah. If we only ever do exactly what we already know how to do, how do we ever advance?
It's a completely fair pushback.
Yeah.
But the variables we're optimizing for are completely different. The corporate world optimizes for speed and aggressive growth. If Carlos fakes it in a traditional corporate job, maybe a marketing campaign flops, or a spreadsheet has a calculation error. But in applied behavior analysis, we are optimizing for safety.
Ah.
Faking it means you're actively experimenting on vulnerable human beings. A botched behavioral intervention doesn't just lose money. It can cause lasting psychological harm, behavioral regression, or even physical injury.
Wow. So essentially, the stakes dictate the rules. We cannot value speed over safety.
Exactly.
But the ethics code doesn't say you are trapped in your current scope forever, right? How do people like Vasha and Carlos actually expand their competence without breaking the rules? What's the mechanism for growth?
You build the competence before you practice independently. For Vasha transitioning to adult services, she needs to execute specific steps. She must conduct extensive literature reviews on adult transition programs.
Okay, so hitting the books.
Yes. But more importantly, she needs to seek out targeted mentorship. She needs to find an established expert in adult services and co-treat with them.
That makes sense.
The mentor reviews her treatment plans, observes her implementation, and guides her. You learn under the protective umbrella of someone else's competence until you develop your own.
It's like you don't learn how to perform open heart surgery by just opening someone up and consulting an anatomy textbook on the fly.
Please don't.
Right. You need an attending surgeon standing right over your shoulder, guiding your hands. Which brings us to the lifeline of this entire profession, supervision and consultation.
It really is a lifeline.
If ethical growth requires a safety net, how do professionals actually use supervision without it turning into a disaster?
Well, the sources make it clear that seeking consultation is not a sign of weakness. It's a mandatory ethical obligation when you hit the edge of your map. For example, if you encounter a new medical or psychological diagnosis.
Like the case of Sebastian from our workbook.
Exactly. Let's say you're handed a case like Sebastian. He has a rare genetic disorder that deeply affects satiation, meaning he basically never feels full, which leads to severe, dangerous, food-seeking behaviors.
You can't just run standard behavioral protocols for a tantrum in that case.
No, you absolutely can't. You need a medical understanding integrated into the behavioral approach. You must find a behavior analyst with experience in that specific condition and either refer the case entirely or have them consult closely with you.
But, supervision is only a lifeline if the supervision is actually effective. It can't just be a signature on a piece of paper.
Oh, for sure.
The sources gave some wild examples of supervision gone completely wrong, starting with the scenario I mentioned at the very beginning of the deep dive, the make it work scenario.
This one is chilling. A BTABA therapist is doing one-on-one therapy with an autistic child. Another therapist is sick, so the clinic director just drops a second child into her room. No curriculum, no instructions, just this is for today, make it work.
And it wasn't just for today. It happened the next day and the next. For a whole week, she was essentially just babysitting two children, desperately trying to manage them both in a tiny room.
It's in a nightmare scenario.
And by Friday, the primary child's parents noticed their kid was restless, dysregulated, and less verbal. The child actually suffered behavioral regression because the agency prioritized their own logistical convenience over ethical, effective treatment.
It's a catastrophic failure of what the code calls supervisory volume, code 4.03.
Right.
Supervisors can only take on as many supervisees and cases as they can effectively and safely manage. If a clinic is spread so thin that they're forcing therapists into babysitting roles, they cannot provide evidence-based supervision.
And the supervisor is held completely accountable for that, right?
Completely accountable for the mistakes and the professional activities of their trainees.
And even if a supervisor does have the time, the quality of the feedback is the next hurdle. That brings up Misty, a registered behavior technician from our sources. Misty only ever received compliment sandwiches from her supervisor.
Yes, the classic compliment sandwich.
Misty, you were so great with the kids. Try to take better data, but really, nice shirt today.
Right. And on the surface, you might think, well, it's just being nice. What's the harm?
But Misty felt like she wasn't actually learning anything. She begged her supervisor for specific corrective feedback because she knew she couldn't be doing everything perfectly. What's the actual behavioral mechanism behind why the compliment sandwich fails as a teaching tool?
Behaviorally speaking, When a supervisor hides a critique between two compliments, they're muddying the contingencies.
Muddying the contingency.
Yeah, the trainee's brain doesn't know which specific behavior is actually being reinforced and which is being corrected. The praise dilutes the corrective feedback so much that it loses its functional value. The trainee walks away feeling vaguely good, but having absolutely no idea what mechanical skill they need to change.
So effective supervision requires clarity.
Extreme clarity. It must be competency-based. It requires clear performance expectations, direct observation, modeling the correct skill, having the trainee practice it in real time, and then providing specific, objective, immediate feedback until mastery is achieved.
It's like a high-level sports coach.
Exactly like that.
A great coach doesn't just pat you on the back after a game and say, "Great job out there."
Yep.
They sit you down, pause the game tape, circle your feet on the screen, point out the exact biomechanical error in your footwork, and then make you run that specific drill 50 times until your muscle memory is flawless.
Exactly. You don't just talk about the theory of the footwork. You rehearse the application until it's perfect.
Okay, so we've covered the high-level theory. We know we need to constantly update our knowledge to fight skill decay. We know we have to stay within our scope of competence, and we understand the behavioral mechanisms of rigorous supervision.
Yep, that's the foundation.
But trying to memorize all these ethical boundaries while actually doing the stressful day-to-day job is incredibly overwhelming, which is exactly why resources like Amethyst Therapy Services exist.
Absolutely. Having a structured way to digest this information is crucial for both passing the exam and surviving in the clinic.
For sure. So for those of you actively prepping for the BCBA exam, or if you're just looking to deepen your everyday clinical practice, Amethyst Therapy Services is a vital tool. They focus heavily on topics exactly like today's developing and maintaining professional competence, E.3, on the task list.
They're great at breaking it down.
They really are. They break down what counts as professional development, when to seek consultation, and how to rigorously identify your limits. You can follow them for more ABA content and exam prep tools at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or reach out directly at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
And, utilizing prep resources is so important because the exam and the real world is going to test your ethical reflexes under pressure.
Oh, definitely.
And the study guide sources provide an incredibly practical strategy for exactly this. They suggest that before the test even begins, or before you walk into a difficult clinical meeting, you write 3 words at the top of your whiteboard or your notepad: client, science, parsimony.
Client, science, parsimony. Let's unpack those 3 words. Why are they the ultimate ethical filter?
Because almost every tricky scenario you face can be solved by running it through those 3 concepts. Let's start with client. This means you always prioritize the client's rights and best interests over everything else.
Over everything.
Over the agency's logistical convenience, over the insurance company's billing structure, and certainly over your supervisor's ego.
Client first. Always. What about science?
Science means that as a behavior analyst, you rely solely on evidence-based, conceptually systematic interventions.
Wait, pause on that phrase, conceptually systematic, meaning the intervention actually has to tie back to the basic proven principles of behavior, like reinforcement or extinction, not just be some random trick that seemed to work once on TikTok.
Precisely. When a parent brings you an article about a trendy, unproven intervention, you don't just adopt it to make them happy.
Even if it's easier.
Right. You evaluate the scientific evidence. You protect the client from pseudoscience by ensuring every single thing you do is conceptually systematic.
And the last word, parsimony. What does that mean in practice?
Parsimony is the principle that you must look for the simplest, most logical explanation before you jump to complex, abstract assumptions.
Like Occam's razor.
Basically, yes. If a client is suddenly exhibiting severe, out-of-character behaviors, parsimony dictates you rule out the simplest explanations first. Are they in physical pain? Did their medication change? You do not assume a complex psychological trauma before you've ruled out a basic ear infection.
Okay, client, science, parsimony. Let's actually test this live. Let's apply this framework to the make it work scenario we talked about earlier, where the therapist was handed a second kid with no plan. How does this framework solve that dilemma?
It cuts right through the chaos. First, client. Does babysitting 2 kids with no curriculum benefit the client?
No, it actively harms their treatment and causes regression.
Right. Second, science is throwing 2 clients in a room without a behavior plan, a conceptually systematic intervention.
No, it abandons the science entirely.
Exactly. Third, parsimony. What's the simplest explanation for why the clinic director is doing this? It isn't because the child suddenly needs a peer group. The simplest explanation is that the clinic is short-staffed and prioritizing billing over ethics.
Wow. When you filter the panic through those three words, the ethical answer becomes glaringly obvious.
It really does.
And 9 times out of 10, that ethical answer involves saying no, admitting you don't know, seeking consultation, or referring the client out to someone who does.
Because having the humility to admit what you don't know is the ultimate proof of your competence.
That is, wow. This has been an incredibly eye-opening dive. Let's recap the core message for you. Competence is not a destination. It's an ongoing, relentless cycle.
Yep.
It's reading the literature to fight skill decay. It's collecting your CEUs. It's having the self-awareness to recognize the hard boundaries of your specific experience. And it's relying on rigorous, competency-based supervision to slowly expand those boundaries safely.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder as you go back to your studying or your practice. Throughout this deep dive and throughout the ethics code itself, we spend so much time worrying about the competence of newly minted, inexperienced professionals. We worry about the rookies making naive mistakes.
Right, the Joaquins and the Carloses of the world who just don't know any better yet.
But consider this. What if the greatest threat to a client isn't an untrained rookie? What if the greatest threat is actually a veteran of 20 years?
Oh, wow.
A professional who has been in the field so long that they have lost their cultural humility. Someone who has stopped asking questions, stopped reading the literature because they think they've seen it all, and has become entirely arrogantly convinced that they have absolutely nothing left to learn.
The 18-wheeler driver who has driven the mountain pass so many times they stopped checking their brakes before a blizzard.
Precisely. That is when the illusion of competence becomes truly dangerous.
A huge thank you to you, our listener, for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep learning, keep asking the hard questions, and whatever you do, keep checking your brakes.